Welcome back. It's been a while. It's the rundown with me, Joe Nagy, and Brandon Worth. I don't know on the screen if he's above me, below, to the right, or to the left, whatever it may be. But me and Brandon are here for this episode of the rundown. It's been a while, Brandon.
It has been a minute. It's good to be back. Obviously, Mother Nature has created some havoc for us recording schedule-wise for all of our shows, but we're glad to have basketball finally back because we were originally going to start last week. Of course, Mother Nature canceled about every single game in that entire week, so then we had to wait a week. But now it's good to be back talking to you guys, the fans, and hopefully we get you a really good informative show because we got a lot to cover here coming in the second half.
Yeah, we really do. And especially with Big Rapids being in action last night, Brandon will kind of talk about that game, but not everybody was in action. So it's kind of like a yes and no, everybody. Like it's kind of a full episode, but not at the same time, if I can explain it like that. But we're going to try to give you the best of what we have so far with the CSAA being back in action. And then we'll kind of get back to the normal swing of things next week with when everybody's back in action for that episode. So we'll get basically right into it, Brandon. Yesterday, Big Rapids took on Cadillac. A little bit of a tough look from the Cardinals, especially playing a big team like Cadillac. I mean, just talk us through what you saw given the play-by-play calls.
Yeah, Coach Besenberg always has a phenomenal team on the floor. Over the last 6 years, he's made a really powerhouse program. And it's not only the size of the players was very imminent in that game. Cadillac had a 2-3 inch size advantage, especially down on the blocks. They have a lot of talented scorers that can score around the basket that way. But I think especially the biggest thing, they made countless 3-point shots. It felt like they never missed all night. I believe unofficially I had them 7 for 9 in my personal stat book from beyond the arc. So whenever they had it outside, they were able to knock it down. Eli Main, I think, had 5 triples by himself.
Oh my
But
gosh,
that
dude.
yeah, he was just absolutely lighting it up. But I think the biggest takeaway from this game, because everyone's going to look 74-38, what in the world happened? This Big Rapids team is good, and they are good. And this was kind of really one of those unfortunate situations. You're not going to make excuses. This team obviously does not make excuses. We've heard that time and time again, no matter if it's a loss that they could get an excuse for or not. They're not going to make an excuse. But the fact is, Cadillac played 3 games in the span that Big Rapids was only able to play 1, and that was 13 days ago when they played St. Francis. So getting back to actual organized competition in an official game, it's tough when you have that long of a break, especially against a good team like Cadillac. Just some of those little things that really come to mind when you're in that momentumous role of how a season progresses. The little things of, defending backdoor cuts on the block. They gave that up a couple times in this game. And especially when you looked at how the game progressed, Cadillac did a really good job of moving the basketball around, and they would be finding the open man. So that cross-court movement was definitely really well done by Coach Besenberg. Big Rapids didn't play a bad game per se. They tried to force the issue a little bit too quickly, if you ask me, especially on the individualized. They were penetrating really well. They were starting to get some nice pick-and-roll action, but Cadillac hedged those screens really well. They went to a zone in the second half when they tried out. Likely for other teams down the road, they'll play in the Big North, but I think that certainly was something that when you saw, Big Rapids got a couple looks, but they just weren't able to really get a lot of shots up either because of that length from Cadillac, and that just really forced the issue. Cadillac got out to, I believe, an 11-0 run, and they didn't look back in this one. They looked really good, but Big Rapids, I think, certainly has a big opportunity to bounce back here at the end of the week on Friday.
Yeah, for sure. I'll actually be on the call for that one. So you'll have a little bit of a switch
Hey.
up. That's going to be a blast. Central Montcalm is coming to town. But especially with that Cadillac team, you mentioned it there. This is the first year that they are in D1 for basketball, correct?
Yes, it is. This is their first year in D1, and many people thought, yeah, this might be a year, they kind of, get bumped down a little bit from that pedestal of prominence. But I think that team, especially for Coach Besenberg, they have different ideas in mind. They want to keep the success going, which they do have a similar schedule. So obviously you can compare that over. It's like, oh, they moved all the way up to D1. It's not like they're going across the state to going to play the Hound, the Detroit, the Grand Rapids teams. They're still playing a lot of the same schedule, and especially the Big North. But they're still putting it together, and especially when it comes tournament time. I mean, now being in District 3, I mean, they got a tough test coming, but they're still looking up to the test for it. They're still looking like that pesky Viking team we've seen over many years.
Yeah, it's not easy for Big Rapids, especially. I mean, like you said too. I mean, They're supposed to play Traverse City West, also with Chip Hills being postponed. It's not easy coming off a 13-day, break, especially not being able to get practices in and stuff like that. It's not always the easiest one to come back from. But I feel like that's good for Big Rapids. They play Central Montcalm. Second half of the season starting up. A lot of teams are in action tonight as well. So if you want to kind of check out our hometown scoreboard, you can do that as well. But Brandon, second half of the season, new book has been open for a lot of teams, a new chance for them to make some noise. Who do you think is really going to be able to kind of come out of nowhere for the CS? I keep trying to say CCHA. I don't know why it is every time,
Yep.
but CSAA standings. Who do you think is going to kind of make some noise? Who do you think is probably going to keep on going with the momentum that they had from the end of the first half? I mean, just kind of talk us through what you're thinking for CSAA action.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many acronyms in the sports world. It's hard enough to keep track of a couple, let alone 7 or 8 that
It's
we have
going
to
a
deal
million
with on a
miles a
daily
minute. It's
basis.
going a million miles
But
a minute up here. So
yeah, for sure. But I think the biggest team that I'm looking out for, and I kind of alluded this when we started talking here before we got kind of towards the new year, when we started to making a couple predictions. Based on Friday night, I'll be very curious how Central Montcalm does. Now, obviously, you look at their record; they're not necessarily the best team in the book right now, sitting with only 3 wins and quite a few losses. They've been on a little bit of a skid, but they have really a lot of winnable games, especially down the stretch. They got Harrison. Alma's going to be a good test for them. Lakeview, Kent City, Morley Stanwood to end the season. They also have Chip Hills coming up on the schedule. So if they can really kind of turn the page a little bit, get a couple wins here in the next couple games when they got tough tests against Chip Hills. They're going to play Big Rapids, as mentioned. So if they can pick up a win or two there, now they're looking at a potential, you could say, even predict a 4 or 5 game burner for them going down the stretch because of how well they could be playing with the talent they have on that roster right now. So they're sitting in 8th right now. I could see them moving up in fighting for that top 4 spot near the top with Kent City and potentially with Chip Hills and some of those teams. Right now, Big Rapids is outside the top 5. I think by the end of the season that will change. You can call me a homer. It's whatever. I think that team will be fighting for a CSAA tournament spot, but especially who I really am looking forward to seeing what that White Cloud Indian team does here in the second half. They started off really strong, 9-2 through their first 11. They played very good basketball. They can do it in all facets with the athleticism they have, shooting the basketball. They have a really deep bench. So what they can do over the second half really could control their own destiny, because you got Reach City, obviously. We're thinking Big Rapids is going to make it in. And then there's really 3 teams fighting for that next spot. It's Newaygo, Grant, and White Cloud. So one of those teams is not going to get into that top 4 and compete for a CSAA tournament title here at the end of the season. But I think this White Cloud team is going to be the one to watch out of those 2. We know Grant and Newaygo are going to be good, and we could see them being in that spot. But White Cloud's in a really unique position, of course, because they've had such a strong start to the season with that roster makeup that Coach Bob Jones has. They can shoot the lights out. That's going to be a team that I think you're going to be one of looking out for here once we get into later parts of February.
Yeah, I like how you brought up White Cloud, because I was going to say that too. They're a team who, with the remaining schedule they have, it's a healthy mix of teams that could be chalk W's or could be chalk L's. It kind of depends on how it's going to be, but this team is definitely reeling. I mean, they're in the same kind of boat as Big Rapids was. They have that makeup game against Grant coming up, and now they have Chip Hills, I think tonight or Friday. Yeah, Friday, excuse me. They'll be playing them, and I mean, Chip Hills has been a team that is kind of sneaky good, like you alluded to. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. But honestly, I would say my like kind of dark horse thing, or I guess don't let me not get too far ahead of myself. I have one more thing to say before I kind of get into that. What I've noticed so far about the CCHA, again, I don't know what I'm talking about. See, I feel like if I'm doing this show, I should probably know what I'm saying. The
Slapshot.
CSAA, I apologize, WBRN, CSAA, whatever, doesn't matter. The CSAA has I wouldn't say a harsh drop off after that 5 spot when it comes to overall records and kind of ability to get the wins in the column, but chalk wise and record wise, it shows that. But if you kind of look at Chip Hills, I think Central Montcalm too is a team that's kind of looking for that identity and is going to just find that spark. They might find it this Friday against Big Rapids. They might find it maybe next week or the week after. But this is kind of an interesting situation for the CSAA where it's, you got a lot of teams who are just good and have a solid little reputation. And then you have the teams who are just kind of bottom of the barrel. And we haven't really seen this stark drop off between the 2 halves of the conference in probably quite some time, to be honest with you. I can't remember the last time that we've seen this in the conference.
Yeah, you definitely look at where kind of that pedestal is, and you obviously have a little bit of a fade when it goes from 1 through 5 down to 6, 7, 8. It's not a huge fade, but it's definitely noticeable enough when you look at the numbers, you look at the statistics, and I think it's the craziest thing. We have obviously the Michigan Power Rating that kind of deciphers, beyond the record, how good really are these teams when it comes down to it. I mean, you're looking at Big Rapids as the number one team in this conference when it comes to strength of schedule, win percentage, all of that formulated together. Then you have Reed City, then you have White Cloud, Grant, and then Central Montcalm. Central Montcalm is 5 in NPR, and they're right now 8th in the conference. That just shows you how really tough of a schedule they've had over the first half of the season. So what that really brought for them is an opportunity now to run it in the second half if they play better basketball. Which, I mean, you watch the film. I watched especially the White Cloud Central Montcalm film because that game was absolutely electric going into overtime. It was a 2-point win for White Cloud on the road. But you looked at how they didn't play bad basketball. Their defense definitely could use some help, and I think that's certainly been a notable thing for them overall. I believe they're one of the highest teams in the CSAA, 62 points allowed per game, as opposed to scoring just about 53. So that's where they need to drastically improve is defensively, because offensively they're scoring points. They're scoring the same number of points Big Rapids is, and Big Rapids is 7-3, whereas Central Montcalm's only a 3-win team. So you have that flip the script defensively. If they can start to put those things together, I mean, they're going to be in really good shape. But I think especially, I mean, you look at those top 4 teams we have right now in the CSA of Reed City, Newaygo, Grant, White Cloud. All 4 of those teams are the top scoring teams offensively in this conference, right? Newaygo averages about 57 a game. White Cloud averages about 62 a game right now, according to my math. Grant is up there in the 60s. Reed City is also up there as well. Some of those could be a little bit skewed because obviously there's new data to be put in from some of those winter games. But based on that point, I mean, the teams that are scoring the most are the ones right now that are winning all these games early on. And strength of schedule is going to be a big factor going into the second half of now. You got some of these teams like Big Rapids, like Central Montcalm, even Chip Hills we're going to be really interested to watch. I mean, Jordan Hansen's been a heck of a story for this team so far this year. He's just been an absolute scoring machine. So how these teams adjust now over the second half of the season with some favorable schedules, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to watch. But I think I would agree with you, Joe. I mean, when you look at the tiers, I mean, there's a potential 6 teams we could see right now being in that top 4 spot. But from the rest of it going back down, I mean, that gray area, that middle ground, I think it's going to be really skewed. I think we're going to see a lot of flip-flopping, and it might be game-by-game basis because obviously a lot of these teams only a game and a half away from each other at this point. So you're going to see 4-game, 5-game win streaks down the stretch. It's going to have to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. But that gray area is going to be one to watch for. That 3, 4, 5, 6 ground, I think is really where this race is going to be ran.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm here for it. That just makes the CSAA just a little bit better. And also with the tournament coming up at the end of the year, it's going to be interesting to see which 4 teams make it in. I think it's time. It's going to be a little bit shorter episode for you guys today, but I think it's time to hop into our dark horse predictions. Theme for today, second half. What's going to happen? Who do we think is going to make the most noise? Who do we think is going to fall off? Everywhere in between, wildest prediction. Brandon, I'll let you have the honors of going first. What do you think? Get in character. Let me know. What do you think is going to happen? Dark horse. Let me see it.
Did you say get in character? I
I did
mean,
say that.
I mean, if you're asking for it, you're going to get it. Dark horse for me, this is definitely one that I think is going to be quote unquote a little bit out there when it comes down to the current standings. I think what we're going to see this time around, I think we are going to see a Chippewa Hills team make it to the 5 spot potentially by the end of the year. I know it sounds crazy. I know it really sounds bonkers, but I think Chip Hills has a really good shot here for how well they've been playing, and you look especially at where they are at here overall in this season. I think Tri-County could also really have a really solid opportunity too to make up a lot of ground as well. But I think when you look at where Chip Hills goes here for the next couple games, they go on the road to White Cloud. They're at home against Clare. They're going to have a lot of competition here down the stretch. If they win some of these conference games, and especially you look at these conference games, yes, they're going to start against some teams on the road, but the last couple games, I mean, they're going to be at home against Grant, they're going to be at home against Lakeview, so they're going to have a chance to make up a lot of this ground. So I think it's going to be crazy to think, and of course, that's why we call it a dark horse, right? You think there's a chance of it happening, you're going to call it, but you're not going to maybe I wouldn't put my mortgage on this one just yet. I might put my mortgage more on Big Rapids being the #1 seed by the end this whole thing's over. You can call me a homer, I don't care, because that's what we do on this program. You can see the logo above my head. But I think that's going to be one I think where I could call right now. Have a little bit of stats to back it up because I think Chip Hills defensively will make improvements. Their offense has started to be more consistent over the last couple weeks. They carry that over here into this tough conference games that are winnable games on the road. I mean, we might be talking about a different Warrior team by the time we get into March, man.
Yeah, for sure. I like the glasses. It makes me laugh a little bit, but I do like
Got to get in
I
character,
do I do like the glasses. For me though, I've been looking over. I do have to agree with you. I'm not trying to be a homer or anything, but Tri-County I think is a team who can really make some changes. If you look at their second half of the season coming up, they've been 1-8 so far, but they don't have the toughest lineup. I mean, you got Reed City, you got two Grant games, you're going to be split home and away, and then you got Newaygo later on in the season. But honestly, if you can pick up this Grant win on Friday at home, kind of give you a little bit of momentum going into Morley and Lakeview, who are two very beatable teams. That'll give you some solid momentum. And Grant, keep in mind, they are in the top, I think, four. Yeah, #3 in the conference. But overall, they're a team that's nearing that 500 mark. So I'm not calling them fraudulent or anything, but I'm saying that they're a team that, although they have one of the best records in the conference, they're a team that still can be beaten. And we've seen that so far. But another team who I think can really do some real good business is Central Montcalm. They're another team that's kind of in the same situation as Tri-County, have a couple more wins on the docket on a 4-game losing streak, and they had one of their games postponed. They had Big Rapids coming up in their first game back after the break. That's going to be a tough little that's going to be a tough little test for them. And they have some other tough games coming up with Alma. Harrison, too, is a team who could really make some noise, too. But they have a lot of home games in the second half of the season. Steal some of these wins away from teams like Alma, Grant, Big Rapids. I think you're going to see a solid little momentum boost for the Hornets to be able to make some noise and maybe even get to that point where they'll be sneaking their way into the CSAA tournament at the end of the season. But time will tell, like I said. But 1-3 in the conference, I feel like you can really see them pick up probably another 5 more wins in the conference, then 5-3 at the end of the year.
Yeah, for sure. And especially touching on Tri-County, I mean, this is a team that you watch on film and you're like, man, this team is so talented. It's hard to believe that they're sitting only with one win right now. So you have to imagine, especially with, like you mentioned, Joe, some of these conference games that are winnable down the stretch for them. They're going to pick up a couple of wins, and I think they could be a team that we could see fighting in that 8-9 spot, trying to get into that silver level of the tournament at that second tier. So that'll be very interesting to watch. But I think also another team that really kind of spoke in my mind here as I said things out loud was that White Cloud is a team that when you look at their schedule, especially, I don't know why I didn't even notice this here early on. I mean, they are playing at home against Chip Hills. They're playing at home against Kent City. Like, they have a very, very, very favorable schedule. The only tough test is going to be their last regular season game, truly, in conference play, I should say. Just in conference play, will be at Reed City. But other than that, they're hosting Morley Stanwood. They're on the road at Newaygo. That might be their next toughest one. They're at home against Kent City. They're at Lakeview. They're hosting Chippewa Hills. So that team could be very interesting to watch if they can really kind of slide up into a 3 seed. And how are Newaygo and Grant going to respond to that? Because they have a little bit of a tougher conference schedule, but they also have some tougher non-conference games. I believe Newaygo is also playing Whitehall, a team Big Rapids is going to play at the end of the year, who is a really, really good basketball team. So how are those teams going to respond to the competition? How does that substance translate over into the contest later on this season? I mean, I think it's going to be who is battle testing by the end of the year. That's how this seeding is going to shake out here by the time we get in CSA tournament time.
Yeah, and my last final thoughts. I think they're playing at White Cloud against Reed City, Brandon, for the last part. I think you might have misspoke, but still, it's going to be interesting. And to go back to that Tri-County team, I'm sorry that we kind of keep jumping around, that we can't stay on one team for super long. We have to go back and forth. It's kind of a jumble. Hopefully, you're able to follow along. But this Tri-County team, too, when you look at a lot of their losses, they have not been bad losses. There's been a few. I mean, against Aviation Academy losing by 10. You also kind of had a tough loss against Greenville, but a lot of these other games, they're within 10 points with some of these teams. If you look at Central Montcalm within 3, Fremont, that was a tough one a little bit, down by about 14, 13 points or something like that. But I mean, Big Rapids, you only lose by 10. You get that win against Lakeview. You're on a little bit of a losing skid, but I think they're going to be able to turn it on really, really fast. But that White Cloud team is going to be one who, with their strength of schedule remaining, I think is a team that's probably could have a very well chance of winning out, especially with how many games they have at home. It's a recipe for success. It just depends on if they put the right ingredients in. And I think they'll be able to, especially seeing their first half of the season, but we'll see how it plays out. Brandon, I think that's going to be it for this episode of the Rundown. Solid little debate, solid little discourse between us two, I think. And we're going to be back next week with even more stuff going on in the CSAA. Brandon, any closing regards? Anything you want to tell the people about what they can expect? What just what's on your mind? Doesn't have to be CSAA related. Whatever you want to say. I'll just let you have the floor for a hot set.
Yeah, Steven Izzo is the GOAT of college basketball. No, I'm just kidding. But how about that moment, man, for him to be
Didn't
able to
his son
score?
score his first point or something?
Scored his first college point, or excuse me, his first college field goal. He had a free throw like maybe a
Ah,
couple years ago. For those that follow along with Michigan State basketball, we won't talk about Michigan basketball. I don't know where they're at right now, but certainly cool moment for him. I do want to say though, Grant and Newaygo, before we go, are very good teams. Like the fact that we don't talk as much about them, it's because we know they're very, very solid. They're very, very good, and we know they're going to be competing in the top 4 by the end of the year. And they have some very favorable schedules as well, with some of their home and away stands against some of these teams. But I feel like we kind of neglect to talk about it because they're just good enough to the point where there's not really any discussion on, they're going to be a top 4 team. So like Big Rapids, Reed City are also going to be top 4 teams, I think, and White Cloud is also going to be fighting in contention. So it's going to be very fun to see how this shakes out, and we can't wait for March Madness because that's our favorite time of year once it comes basketball time. No matter if you're a bracketologist or you're just a fan, I mean, it's a great time to be alive.
yes, sir. And I almost forgot. We have to do one little quick score prediction for it this Friday. No
Oh
explanation,
yeah.
no nothing. Almost forgot about it. I was going to kick myself if I forgot about it. No explanation, no nothing. Quick score prediction. I'll start this time. I think Lakeview is going to take down Newaygo 53-48.
Whoa,
They're getting
tight
their
score
first win
line.
in 6 games. They're going to break the skid.
Woo!
Don't count the
Okay.
Wildcats out. They're here to stay.
Okay, I like that one. I'll do the Big Rapids game, and then Joe will confirm or deny my prediction is right. I think Big Rapids bounces back in a big way. I think they really will get back on track against this Montcalm team, who hasn't played as well on the road this year. They're still not a bad road team, but I think that there's certainly some room for improvement for that Hornet team when it comes to playing on the road. But I think especially when you look at the scoreline, I think that there's really no way that Big Rapids doesn't score a lot of points, and that's the way they like to play. They like to play that offensive track meet type of style. So against a team in Central Montcalm that only has 2 away wins this year, which was at Tri-County and as well as at Carson City Crystal in non-conference action, I think this is going to be a game where Big Rapids is going to be back on top. I think they win this one. I'm going to go 64 to maybe, let's say 51, 52. I got to probably pick one, don't I? 64-52, your final. Big Rapids gets back on track against the Hornets and push their way back up in the CSAA standings on Friday. Joe will let me know if I am right or wrong. So, but just in case, don't put the mortgage on it just yet. I'll let you know when it's time.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit longer explanation. I mean, I said no explanations, but hey, it's okay. You can break the rules every once in a while if you want to, Brandon.
got,
But like I
got to.
said, we rambled a little bit longer. Obviously, forgot about the segment at the end, but that's going to be it for this episode of the Rundown. We'll be back next week with a little bit longer, kind of recapping the scores of what goes down in the CSA over the weekend and Tuesday. Hopefully, you guys have a great rest of the day. Brandon, this was a solid episode.
Absolutely. Take care, y'all.